Number 22 on this list was underwear. Nobody talked about out loud, yet it outfitted more American children than any brand you'd recognize today. Number 16 was a tire deal so aggressive it turned a clothing store into a gas station, and it vanished the same decade disco did. And number 1 wasn't a product at all. It was a promise, written down by one man in 1902. And when the company finally broke it, thousands of people lost their jobs in a single afternoon. 25 products, every one of them gone. If you had a mother who circled pages in the Penney's catalog every August, or a father who owned exactly one good suit and bought it on a layaway ticket, you lived every single one of these. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next video, because we're just getting started on bringing back the stores, the brands, and the Saturday afternoons this country quietly let go of. Number 25. Penney's Big Book, launched in 1963. J.C. Penney Company bought a Milwaukee mail-order house in 1962 just to get into the catalog business at all. What most people don't know is that Penney's was actually late to catalogs. By 1999, its catalog sales alone were pulling in $4 billion a year, a number the company quietly buried once it moved everyone online. A family gathered around the kitchen table with a thick mail-order catalog. Your mother reading the size chart out loud, your father circling something further back without saying a word. The Big Book was discontinued in 2009. 1,000 pages, gone in one press release because a website doesn't need a spine. The next brand didn't come from a warehouse in Milwaukee, it came from a cotton mill, and it was the first thing a working man ever put his faith in. Number 24. Big Mac, founded 1922. It was the very first private brand Penney's ever built, before the company even had 100 stores to sell it in. What most people don't know is that Big Mac wasn't fashion, it was infrastructure. Miners wore it, farmers wore it. It was engineered to survive a man's entire working life, not one season of style. A man in sturdy work clothes out on a job site. Your father wearing the same kind, breaking them in over a long summer until they finally moved the way he did. Big Mac work pants are still technically sold today, but the version your grandfather wore, built for a lifetime, not a landfill, quietly disappeared decades ago. The next name on this list wasn't for the barn, it was for church, for weddings, for the one day a year a man wanted to look like somebody. Number 23. Towncraft, founded 1927. Penney's built it specifically so a working family could dress a man like he belonged downtown. What most people don't know is that Towncraft wasn't a discount label back then. It was aspirational. A Towncraft dress shirt was often the nicest thing a man owned outright. Vintage collectors now hunt Towncraft tags from this era like they're archaeology. A man adjusting a crisp dress shirt in front of a mirror. Your father dressing the same careful way every single Sunday before church. Towncraft still exists as a house brand today, but the specific shirts your grandfather owned, the ones cut for a body that did manual labor 5 days a week, were quietly redesigned out of existence. Next came the department nobody's grandfather ever mentioned by name, but every household depended on it completely. Number 22. Adonna, founded in 1931. It was Penney's private label for women's, misses', and children's underwear, one of the company's oldest brands, older than most people realize. What most people don't know is that foundations departments like this one were tucked into the back corner on purpose, away from the front windows, staffed by a saleswoman who knew every regular customer's exact size by heart. A quiet fitting room inside a department store. Your mother speaking softly with the clerk there, in a tone she never used anywhere else in the store. Adonna quietly disappeared from store shelves as bigger national lingerie brands took over the category. The name that outfitted 3 generations of women simply stopped being printed on a tag. The next counter over sold something just as forgotten and just as essential to looking presentable in 1962. Number 21. Marathon, one of Penney's very first private brands, dating back to the company's earliest expansion years. A man did not leave the house bareheaded. What most people don't know is that a hat wasn't an accessory in this era, it was a rule. Etiquette required men to remove it indoors and tip it to women on the street. An entire silent language existed around a single piece of felt. A man setting a felt hat on his head before leaving the house. Your grandfather adjusting the brim to the exact same tilt every single time without ever being taught to. By the mid-1960s, hats were disappearing off American heads entirely. Historians still argue about why, but the counter that sold them simply ran out of customers. The next department sold something a woman couldn't leave the house without either, and it came in a color called nude that wasn't anyone's actual skin tone. Number 20. Gay Mode. Penney's house hosiery brand, sold at counters across the country by the early 1960s. Every pair had a seam running straight up the back of the leg. What most people don't know is that keeping that seam perfectly straight was a full daily performance. Women checked it in shop windows, asked friends to check it for them, and treated a crooked seam as a small public failure. An entire etiquette existed around a single line of thread. A woman checking her stockings in a mirror before leaving the house. Your mother turning sideways the same way, checking the seam was straight before she'd walk out the door. Seamless hosiery took over the market through the 1960s, and the brand built entirely around that one perfect seam quietly stopped mattering. Next came a name most people have never once heard out loud, sitting one counter further down. Number 19. Silver Moon. Another of Penney's early house labels, sold alongside Adonna in the same quiet corner of the store. What most people don't know is that private labels like this one were often manufactured in the very same mills as far more expensive department store brands at a fraction of the price. Penney's built its entire reputation on that exact secret. A small gift box wrapped carefully in tissue paper at a store counter. Your mother tucking it into her bag before anyone else in line could see what it was. Silver Moon disappeared from Penney's shelves as the company consolidated its private brands decades later. One more name erased from a tag nobody photographed before it was gone. The next item on this list wasn't a brand at all. It was a small paper ticket, and it may be the most quietly important object in this entire video. Number 18. The layaway counter. No founding date, no brand name, just a wooden counter near the front of nearly every Penney store in the country. What most people don't know is that layaway was survival math, not a courtesy. A family paid a little each week. The item sat in a back room with their name on it, and they picked it up debt-free the day it was paid off. No interest, no credit check. A store clerk filing an item away behind the counter for a customer. Your mother making her payment there the same short way, every single week. Layaway all but vanished once credit cards took over American retail in the 70s and 80s. The patience it required simply stopped fitting the culture around it. The next department didn't sell clothes at all. It sold the future, on a kitchen appliance nobody could afford outright. Number 17. Penncrest. Launched in 1962, the very year this video is named for, manufactured for pennies by General Electric's Hotpoint brand. What most people don't know is that entering the appliance business in 1962 was a genuine gamble. The company had spent 60 years selling only clothing and dry goods, and Penncrest was the first time it bet its name on something with a motor in it. A new refrigerator delivered into a family kitchen. Your mother running her hand along the front of it, like she still couldn't quite believe it was hers. Penncrest quietly disappeared as Penney's shifted focus away from major appliances entirely in later decades, exiting a business it had once bet its whole reputation on. Next came a partnership that turned a clothing store into a place you'd bring your car. Number 16. Penney's Auto Center. Also launched in 1962, built through a direct partnership with Goodyear, right alongside the new stores going up in growing American suburbs. What most people don't know is that for 2 decades, you could genuinely walk into a Penney's to buy a dress shirt and drive out with 4 new tires, 1 stop, 1 receipt, 1 afternoon. It's a combination that sounds almost invented now. A car raised on a lift inside a service bay. Your father sitting in the waiting room afterward, reading a newspaper he hadn't brought with him. Penney's sold its auto centers to Firestone in 1983, ending the tire business for good. The store went back to being just a store. Next came a discount experiment most people alive today have never even heard the name of. Number 15. Treasure Island. Launched in 1962 as Penney's attempt to compete with the new wave of discount department stores springing up across the Midwest. What most people don't know is that this experiment ran for nearly 2 decades before quietly failing, wiped almost entirely from public memory by the very format it was trying to compete with. A bright discount store aisle that felt different from the main department store down the road. Your mother comparing a price here against the one she remembered from Penney's. Treasure Island simply closed its doors in 1981, and the name never appeared on a storefront again. The next thing on this list wasn't a product either, it was a policy, and losing it changed how an entire country was allowed to shop. Number 14. The cash-only policy. From 1902 all the way to 1958, J.C. Penney refused to sell on credit at all. Full stop, no exceptions, straight from the founder's own personal code. What most people don't know is that James Cash Penney genuinely believed credit corrupted both the customer and the store. He held out against it for 56 years, only relenting once the market left him no choice. A customer counting out cash carefully at a store counter. Your grandmother folding her bills the same practiced way every time. Never crumpled, always flat. The company finally introduced its own credit cards starting in 1959. And by the 1962 this video is named for, cash-only pennies was already a memory for most families. The next counter over held a job nobody thinks about anymore, wrapping something in brown paper with string every single time. Number 13. The wrapping counter. Standard at nearly every Penney's location, taught the exact same way in nearly every store. A skill treated with genuine seriousness by management. What most people don't know is that James Cash Penney personally trained a young stock boy in Des Moines in 1940 to wrap a package using the least paper and ribbon possible. That stock boy's name was Sam Walton, who carried that same obsession into a company he founded 22 years later. A store clerk wrapping a package in plain paper at the counter. The same careful motion, repeated the exact same way for every single customer. That specific frugal wrapping method faded out with the rise of plastic bags and pre-packaged retail in the decades that followed, a tiny discipline nobody bothered teaching twice. Before we continue, we've covered the catalog, Big Mac, Adonna, the layaway counter, and Penncrest appliances so far. Tell me in the comments, which one of these did your own family actually own? And who in your house was the one who wore it or used it? I read every single one. Number 12. Celebrity brand cotton fabric. Sold by the yard at Penney's fabric counter throughout 1962, alongside McCall's paper sewing patterns in a rack nearby. What most people don't know is that most American women in this era didn't buy finished dresses for everyday wear. They bought 98 cents worth of fabric and a 50-cent pattern and made it themselves at a kitchen table. A mother laying out fabric and a paper pattern at home. Your mother sewing the dress by hand, the way most women did in that era. The fabric and pattern counter quietly closed in Penney's stores as ready-made clothing became cheap enough that home sewing stopped being a necessity. Next came a rule about the calendar itself, one that shaped every single week of the year. Number 11. Sunday closing. A personal rule set by James Cash Penney himself, applied to every store in the chain regardless of location or local custom. What most people don't know is that Penney closed every single store on Sundays for decades specifically, so employees could attend church, a rule enforced from the top down, at real cost to weekend sales, because the founder considered it non-negotiable. A quiet, closed storefront on a Sunday afternoon. Your family walking straight past the dark windows on the way somewhere else. Sunday closing quietly ended store by store, as retail competition intensified through the later decades of the 20th century, until the rule simply stopped existing anywhere. The next item on this list is the building itself, the one with a man in a uniform standing inside a metal box, pulling a lever by hand. Number 10. The elevator operator. A standard fixture in Penney's larger, multi-story downtown stores throughout this era, especially in bigger cities with flagship locations. What most people don't know is that operating an elevator was genuinely a skilled job, timing the stop level with the floor by feel, calling out each department by name, all done entirely by hand. A uniformed elevator operator inside a department store, announcing each floor by hand. Your small hand gripping the rail the whole ride up. Elevator operators disappeared almost entirely once automatic elevators became standard equipment through the 1960s and 1970s, replacing a job with a button. Below that same building was a room most families visited exactly once a year. Number 9. The Portrait Studio. Located in the basement of many larger Penney stores, offering family photography as a standard in-house department. What most people don't know is that for a lot of families, this studio produced the only professional photograph they owned of themselves as a complete unit. the one that sat framed on top of a television set for the next 30 years. A family posed together under studio lighting in a photo studio. Your mother smoothing down a stray hair right before the photo was taken. In-store portrait studios were phased out at most locations in later decades, as digital photography made professional sittings feel unnecessary to a new generation of parents. Back upstairs, one specific counter decided whether your feet actually fit the shoes you were about to wear for a whole school year. Number 8. The shoe fitting counter. A dedicated department in most Penney stores, staffed by a clerk trained specifically to measure a growing child's foot by hand. What most people don't know is that getting your feet measured was treated as a genuine annual ritual tied directly to the start of the school year. Not a quick errand, but a slow, careful process most parents scheduled around because shoes were expected to last the entire year. A store clerk carefully measuring a child's foot for new shoes. Your mother standing close by, asking the same question every single year. The formal, ritualized shoe-fitting appointment faded out as shoe stores and pricing shifted toward faster, self-service shopping in the decades that followed. And once those shoes were bought, there was still one book left to dream from before Christmas morning ever arrived. Number 7. The Christmas Wish Book. Penney's holiday catalog, mailed to homes across the country starting in the early 1960s, printed thick enough to double as a doorstop. What most people don't know is that kids genuinely fought over first access to it the day it arrived, dog-earing pages, circling toys in pencil, building a wish list weeks before their parents ever saw it. A child paging eagerly through a thick holiday catalog at home, your sibling grabbing for the same pages before you'd even finished looking. The holiday catalog tradition faded as printed wish books across the entire retail industry were phased out in the 2000s, replaced by a scrolling list on a screen. The next stop on this list is the exact building that made all of this possible in the first place, the mall it eventually got replaced by. Number 6. Penney's first full-line shopping center store. Opened August 15, 1963, at King of Prussia Plaza in suburban Philadelphia, the beginning of the mall era for the entire company. What most people don't know is that before this, nearly every Penney store sat on a downtown Main Street. This one location quietly marked the turning point where the company bet its future on the suburbs instead of the town square. A family walking through a brand new shopping mall corridor. Your father studying a directory map, looking for a store he used to know by memory downtown. Nearly every downtown Penney storefront that came before, it eventually closed as the entire company shifted to the mall model over the following decades. Back at the register, one small object decided whether a family could afford anything at all that day. Number 5. The charge account ledger. Kept behind the service counter of every Penney store once credit accounts launched in 1959, tracking every family's balance by hand and ink. What most people don't know is that a store clerk in this era could often recite a regular customer's account balance from memory. Credit was personal and local, tracked by a person who knew your name, not a computer that didn't. A store clerk writing a customer's balance into a ledger at the counter. Your mother waiting quietly as the number was read aloud. The handwritten ledger system was phased out once computerized credit tracking took over American retail entirely by the 1970s and 1980s. Next comes the single sentence printed on nearly every price tag in the store, a promise most shoppers never even had to read twice. Number 4. The single price guarantee. Printed directly on the tag of nearly every item in the store, one price for every customer, no haggling allowed, ever. What most people don't know is that this policy was radical for its time. Most stores in the early 1900s still expected customers to negotiate individually. Penney's fixed pricing was, quietly, a fairness policy. A price tag pinned to an item of clothing on a store rack. Your grandmother reading the price and never once asking for a discount. The company's founding fair pricing philosophy quietly eroded over the following decades, and a disastrous 2012 attempt to formally revive it, dropping coupons and sales entirely, nearly destroyed the company within a single year. Behind every one of those price tags was one man's personal set of rules, printed and handed to every single employee at every store. Number 3. The Golden Rule Creed. A written code of conduct James Cash Penney gave to every store manager personally, rooted in the very name of his original 1902 store. What most people don't know is that Penney insisted every employee memorize and follow the creed exactly, banning tobacco and liquor use among staff at a time when that was genuinely unusual for a major employer, and tying every business decision back to a single moral standard. A framed set of store rules hanging in a manager's office, a new employee reading it quietly on their very first day. The formal Golden Rule Creed quietly stopped being posted in stores as the company modernized its management culture in the later 20th century. And now the storefront itself, the actual Main Street building this entire video has been circling around the whole time. Number 2. The downtown storefront. The original Penney's format for the company's first 6 decades, anchoring the main commercial street of small towns across the American West and Midwest. What most people don't know is that many of these buildings, including the very first Kemmerer, Wyoming location, are still standing today, some designated historic landmarks, long after the company stopped operating a register inside them. An old downtown storefront on a small-town Main Street. Your grandfather greeting the store manager by name, the way you can only in a town small enough to know everyone. Most of these original downtown stores closed permanently as the company shifted entirely to mall and strip center locations by the 1970s and 1980s, leaving Main Street with an empty storefront and a faded sign. Which brings us to the very last thing on this list. Not a product, not a department, but the promise the entire company was built on. Number 1. The Golden Rule Store. Opened April 14, 1902 in Kemmerer, Wyoming by James Cash Penney, the single original idea every single item on this list eventually grew out of. What most people don't know is that the company built on that one principle survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression, only to file for bankruptcy in May of 2020, putting thousands of jobs at risk almost overnight. A modest storefront in a small western town. Your great-grandmother walking in for the very first time, trusting a stranger's word that the price on the tag was fair. J.C. Penney emerged from bankruptcy later that same year under new ownership entirely. The company that survived on trust for 118 years didn't die from competition. It died the moment trust stopped being the product. These things didn't stop working. They were discontinued, sold off, and quietly written out of a company that once ran on a handshake. Which one of these was in your home growing up? Not just the object. What does actually remembering it bring back for you? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe, because there is a lot more of this country left to remember.